I'm your girl Varcy. Welcome to In the Shack, where we talk about all things Junkanoo.
And I'm Michael Pateman, and we are here in the Swingers Shack today. And this is our very first podcast.
It is.
We're so excited to bring this. This is something she and I have been talking about for a pretty long
time.
Yeah. The whole point of this podcast is just to talk about all things Junkanoo, especially here in Grand Bahama.
Right.
And also, we're going to plug our documentary we're working on.
Most definitely.
But just make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and watch this and all the future episodes. And also, we have to say that this podcast is being sponsored by Walker's Key Maravilla Rum. And we're going to start a tradition here at our very first podcast. We're going to take a shot of Maravilla Rum at every podcast.
Yeah, let's do this.
Some days we might record a lot of podcasts, so it's going to be quite fun by the end of the day.
Right. But let's just dive deep into why, we have to focus on Freeport, Grand Bahama, because we do have a very fruitful Junkanoo industry. But I think, persons out there don't understand what goes into Junkanoo.
Oh, they don't. And I have to admit, I'm fairly new to Freeport. I moved to Grand Bahama in 2020.
Right.
And I was completely shocked how big the Junkanoo was here, but
Right.
also how good it was.
Right.
I have to admit, I had my Nassau bias.
Oh, Lord.
But yeah, you guys kind of converted me to understand that, you know what? No, we do have Junkanoo all over the country.
Right.
And actually, since I've moved here, I've seen Junkanoo performances and Junkanoo parades all over the country. And I realized, you know what? Yeah, Nassau Junkanoo is good and still where my heart is. But I think some Freeport Junkanoo could surprise you.
Definitely. When I think it's important for persons to understand, like I said before, what goes into it. But we also have a lot of rich history, And so I think that's why me and Pateman have decided to do the podcast and the documentary, simply because there are a lot of voices that need to be heard. Junkanoo has a lot of different jobs within itself. Persons fulfilling those jobs don't necessarily have the platform that they need in order to, to bring it all out there and help the public to understand what's going on.
Yeah, and it's so key because if you talk to people about Junkanoo, they know all the leaders.
Right.
Everybody, especially in the province, we know all the group leaders.
Right.
But do we know the people who are actually making Junkanoo happen?
Behind the scenes, no.
And do we really know how hard it is for them to get the parade off the ground?
Right.
I remember a couple of years ago, actually for Nassau Junkanoo, someone paid for Rawson Square tickets. I think they were about $70.
Right.
And at the end, they complained, it wasn't worth $70. And I saw people were complaining about this on Facebook and so forth. And I'm like,
that?
you realize this kind of performance, $70 is cheap.
Right.
I mean, in reality, those tickets should be a lot more. And then here in Freeport, the most expensive tickets are $20?
Listen, the costumes alone, $70 on a costume ain't no money. I mean, it's just odd. Even a small, tiny costume, $70 is a joke. And so I think what's starting to happen is we have oversaturated the culture and overexposed the culture without giving the flowers and the respect that it needs.
And so that's what we hope this podcast and our documentary, we can keep plugging the documentary,
Right.
will do. But even us, we have our own rich histories in Junkanoo, and some
Right.
people were like, well, why are you guys hosting a podcast on Junkanoo? So I think it's important so people could understand who we are
Right.
and our Junkanoo background. And so, Varcy, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in Junkanoo.
All Junkanoo enthusiasts. Well, I've been in Junkanoo for 25 years, right? And as a little girl, I remember when Junkanoo was in West End. And so my daddy would carry the whole family up there. And I definitely always wanted to be a part of it. So I would, I have a picture too where I'd be dressed down in the crepe paper and things like that. And so I was always attracted to Junkanoo. And not just Junkanoo, but I was always interested in the shack. So surprising that we named the podcast In the Shack, because as a little girl, we weren't really allowed to go to the shack.
Yeah, girls were,
Okay.
or women even. So
Yeah.
even fairly recently, we have a lot of powerful women in Junkanoo now.
All right.
But if we really look at the history of Junkanoo,
Yeah.
women weren't always involved. And you hear a few names of famous women involved in
Right,
Junkanoo.
right.
But even though they were involved, you really don't get how recent it is for women
Right,
to be in
right.
Junkanoo.
Definitely we had a shack in the house. So that would have been our shack where we would go and get the products and then come back home to be in the shack. And in order for us to go to a big shack, it was almost like a field trip. When you go, it was a big experience, but we weren't allowed to be there alone. And so now that I'm older, as woman now, I love the shack because it brings a sense of community. You know what I mean? It brings up a sense of community that you can't find anywhere. And I always tell people in the shack, it's important for me as a person that is interested in learning. I like to learn the different personalities and persons that come from a different walk of life. And it's free wisdom to me. So for me, Junkanoo was always such a rich culture. I've been between the free dancing and the choreographed girls. I couldn't keep up with the choreographed girls. Guys, say, listen. It's 1,000 rules. First of all, you're killing me. I ain't into that. And everybody going left and I won't go right sometimes, I remember even when I joined the Legends band for such a short time, I was twirling a baton and I say, you know what, I ain't into this. I won't be off to the side.
You like to have a little bit of freedom.
I need to be a free spirit, and so I couldn't keep up with it. I couldn't keep up with if they put you in the front, why she got to be in the front? So they put you in the back, so why she got to be in the back? And, I prefer to be a free dancer because I could interact with the crowd. I've grown up, as a kind of shy. And so I think these things I've used to build social skills, social skills that I don't think I really had. And so I use it as a way to, get through the life. I've used it as a weapon. So I think, for me, Junkanoo has always been something that I've made productive. Some persons don't see it that way, but I see Junkanoo as valuable.
It is.
Yeah, I use it to my very best advantage.
Yeah, even me, a lot of people don't realize how long I've been involved in Junkanoo.
Right.
And just sitting here, I had to say, I realized, I've been involved in Junkanoo for over 40 years, and I'm just going to leave it at that. From I was a young child, my godfather, grand uncle, Rosie Phillison, would always take myself and my cousin Kwame out to the parade. And at first, we would always rush with the pigs. That was sort of, I guess, our rite of passage.
Who's the pigs? This is an old group?
The pigs is the scrap group in Nassau. I think they're still around. They are the scrap group. And that's actually the group that our first prime minister used to rush with.
Wow.
And he didn't believe that he should rush with one of the big groups.
That's interesting.
So he was always a member of the pigs.
Okay.
But Ruzi and then eventually myself and Kwame, we all got involved. Ruzi was always a member of the Valley Boys. He's from the Centerville area.
Right,
Anyone from that area, you are a Valley Boy. Your children are Valley Boys. Your all of you
whole
are Valley
generation.
Boys. So even though we were rushing with the pigs at first, I think it was just because of our age, we would go in the Valley Shack and I would see what was going on. And as I got older and more into Junkanoo, one of my dad's friends, a teacher, Barry Miller, was one of the big builders for the Valley Boys. So I would go with him and just work and learn how to build. But where I really got into Junkanoo was actually with Junior Junkanoo. I was in the first Junior Junkanoo in Nassau, not with my school because they weren't in Junior Junkanoo, but my mother was another big person in Junkanoo.
Right.
She was a dancer. I didn't inherit any of those genes.
Oh, Lord.
But she was one of the teachers at Uriah McPhee when Junior Junkanoo first started. And if anyone knows anything about Junior Junkanoo in Nassau, Uriah McPhee dominated Junior Junkanoo the first several years. And I have to say, partially due to my mother. And actually, a lot of Junkanoo historians will also give her that credit. And here's where I'm going to make some people upset with my version of Junkanoo history. So when we talk about Junkanoo, if I ask you, who was the first person to bring choreographed dancing into Junkanoo? We didn't do this off air, so I don't know what she's gonna say.
Well, I know based on the information that was given, it would have been your mother.
Well, we probably have talked about this before, but a lot of people will say Maureen Duvalier.
Okay.
Historically, it's recorded that Maureen Duvalier brought choreographed dancing,
Right.
and a lot of Junkanoo historians will say that. But when I start talking to people, they were like, that wasn't really choreographed dancing, what she did. Yes, she had some moves, but it was more what we call free dancing today.
Okay.
But when we look at Junkanoo and the Bahamas, there was no real choreographed dancing
Right.
until Junior Junkanoo
Right.
and Uriah McPhee.
Right.
And I have to thank Gina Mortimer, who was one of the prominent people behind Junior Junkanoo, especially while she was at SO,
Right.
for reminding me of this history that Uriah McPhee really brought that whole choreographed section to Junkanoo. And then afterwards, Paul Roll from Roots brought it into the big parade. So I have to make sure my mother gets her credit in history.
Right.
Jean Pateman, I will say and I'll maintain, unless someone brings me some facts, that she was responsible for bringing
Right.
choreographed dance into Junkanoo.
Listen, this is before my time, so I gotta sit small till my name call. But the thing is, you've been traveling around the world, right? And you have discovered a lot of festivals that is linked to Junkanoo. So I want you to tell us a little bit more about, first of all, what brought you into, I guess, taking a closer look at Junkanoo. What's the reason?
So anybody who knows me knows I'm an archaeologist for my career, or a historian. And so I'm very interested in Bahamian culture and understanding our roots better. But it wasn't me who brought me into this whole study and understanding of Junkanoo, the history of Junkanoo. It was my good friend Christopher Davis.
Right.
I was living in Turks and Caicos at the time, and he called me and he said, I think I found the true birthplace of Junkanoo. I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, I hadn't really thought about
An
it.
epiphany.
Because, if you read our history books, it tells us Junkanoo started in the Bahamas. You have John Canoe, who was this enslaved man in the Bahamas. There's two stories, but John Canoe was this enslaved man in the Bahamas, and he begged the European powers to allow his people to celebrate this festival.
Right.
But
this holiday.
That story never sat well with me because, all right, if John Canoe was this man in the Bahamas, why do we have Junkanoo in Jamaica? Why was there Junkanoo
all over the
in
world?
North Carolina? Why is there Junkanoo in Belize? And historically, why was it in other places associated with the transatlantic slave trade? So the story never sat well with me.
Right.
So what Christopher found was that the man we know as John Canoe, and those of us who are historians or others may have heard the term John Connie before also, also known as John Connie, was actually an African king or chief in what is today known as Princestown, Ghana. So before I talk about John Canoe, one of the other stories we were taught was that he was this powerful slave trader.
Right.
And once again, that story just didn't sit well with me. Why would freed black people, name their festival after a slave trader? So that didn't make sense to me. So when Christopher went to Ghana, he found out that the man we know as John Canoe is actually called Jan Kwao in his language of the Ahanta people. And he was the chief of what's today called Princestown, and also known as the king of the warriors for the Ahanta. And he was not a slave trader. He actually vigorously fought against colonialization and the transatlantic slave trade.
Hold on. So how you think this is just a gossip story gone wrong, or you feel like this, somebody wanting it to look a certain way, painting a certain narrative?
I think and once again, I get a lot of this from Christopher. This is sort of, if you look at a lot of what we know as Bahamian history, it's very paternalistic. the gracious Europeans.
Mm.
So, would you rather these enslaved people and their descendants, when they're celebrating these festivals, celebrate off of a man who is fighting for their freedom, or an enslaved person? If you're a European power, you're going to want it to be an enslaved person. And just remember, we record these podcasts in the shack. So once in a while, it gets a little
Get all
loud.
the noise.
Yeah. So we think our story of Junkanoo was controlled by the Brits.
Okay.
And controlled by our European powers. So people then ask, well, if he wasn't in the Bahamas, how did we get this story of Junkanoo? So what Christopher found out in his research was that the first slave ship to come from the African coast to the Bahamas left from the region of Ghana where Junkanoo or Junkanoo was a chief. And what it was the warriors of Junkanoo who was captured in battle against the English. So they captured some of his warriors and they sent them on a slave ship to the Bahamas. And that was the first slave ship to ever come to the Bahamas. At the time, there was 250 enslaved black people here. That ship had 270.
Okay.
So they would have sort of set the culture, set the framework of Bahamian culture. The next slave ship to come from the Bahamas also came from that region.
You mean the next slave ship to go to the Bahamas?
To come to the Bahamas, sorry, yes. Also came from that region of Africa.
Okay.
The third slave ship to come to the Bahamas came not from the area that Junkanoo controlled, but from the area right next to it.
Oh.
So, and the influence of Junkanoo and his warriors was well known throughout today what is known as Ghana. But I mean, his influence and his warriors fought battles as far as Gabon, away from Ghana. So if you know the African continent, that's pretty far away.
So we from Ghana?
Our
What's going on?
Cultural base is from Ghana.
Okay.
So we've had a lot of people push back and say, well, this drum is from this part of Africa, the tum-tum drum's from here, the bass drum's from here, and so forth. And I don't know those stories that well. And you're right.
Right.
But you have to think, here you had these people set this cultural foundation. More enslaved Africans would have come, and they would have brought their culture with them.
Okay.
So these cultures would have merged together. And formed today what is our version of Junkanoo. So people will argue, we don't say that Junkanoo is from Princestown, Ghana. We say the roots of Junkanoo is from that area. The roots, not Junkanoo itself. It's a unique sort of creation of in different parts of the Caribbean.
Right. Do you think that the Bahamas has actually taken, what was brought here out of all the different, places and have made it, I guess, further than other versions of Junkanoo?
I think ours is more it's unique and bigger.
And bigger. So
I wouldn't say
scores for Bahamas.
I know some people will argue because I'm supposed to be waving that Bahamian pride flag. So ours is bigger.
Right.
But I'd say like the version in Jamaica, for example, is more closely associated with Africa.
Original. Okay.
And more the original.
Okay.
So in Ghana, for example, or at least in the Hatu region, they have a celebration called the Kundum Festival.
Right.
This is their harvest festival, and it's celebrated basically dancing in groups around drums. Also, they shake the cowbell. And on our first trip to Ghana, Angelique McKay, who she's known as Junkanoo Goddess, she has a bunch of other Junkanoo names. She is the leader of the Junkanoo Commandos, and she goes around the world taking Junkanoo around the world.
Right.
I'll say Bahamian Junkanoo because there is a difference. And she's also been looking for how cowbells are shook. And she said the first time she saw cowbells shake the way we do it was when we went to Ghana. And she's been all over the world with Junkanoo and I've never seen it. Belize has a version of Junkanoo, which is completely different than ours. And once again, it's smaller.
Right.
So ours has just become a lot bigger.
And the funny thing is, to know that it came from obviously I would say a sad story because you have all these slaves, being transported from a place away from home to know that now that we are the descendants, and so we have a very rich culture because of it. So I would a win is a win. A win is a win.
Well, also, I think one of the things to be proud about our Junkanoo is part of the narrative that we've been taught is that the European powers allowed us to celebrate the Junkanoo. I can't remember the exact dates, so I'm going to screw up some dates right now. But I think it was about, I'll say, 1817. A law was passed allowing for the celebration of Junkanoo by freed and enslaved Africans. However, there are accounts of Junkanoo celebrations in our historic documents years before this happened.
Right.
So were the Europeans, the British, really allowing us to celebrate it? Or could they not stop it?
Right.
And so they said, oh, let's pass this law allowing it to happen.
Yeah.
And so we could say, look, we the great overlords, you can celebrate your festival and your culture. That's what I believe. I don't buy into this narrative.
Right.
Because if you know the story of Jan Quao, constantly defeated the British and the Dutch in battle after battle.
Right.
And he never himself was captured and brought into slavery.
Right.
Eventually, he was forced out of Princestown and he went to another part of Ghana where he eventually died. He never was an enslaved person in the Caribbean. So let's just take that narrative.
Right.
And I'm happy to say that we should be seeing that real soon in the curriculum. The correct story.
Right. And my thing is, because how you gonna tell me on my free time? I'm assuming they might have all had some free time, How you gonna tell me how much noise to make?
Well, I mean, you have to think you were enslaved.
I was enslaved, but a biggity slave.
Yeah. Really, when they started to celebrate their culture, because wherever you see these Junkanoo celebrations, because that's what they're called before you get into the names of Junkanoo, Junkanoo.
Right.
I believe and I always butcher the name, Habanero, I'm not even going to try it anymore. And then Junkanoo is added. These are always celebrations of resistance and freedom.
Yeah.
So, And
you're still seeing it today. I mean, I don't want to get in trouble, but you're still seeing it today because there are still a lot of organizations and, persons that want to, place a restriction on Junkanoo itself or Junkanooers. And I think it's really the battle between, placing too much structure and also the free spirits. And I think what Junkanoo has to do, or Junkanooers have to do at this point, is to use both the structure and the free spirit together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we have to think, recently, our version of Junkanoo was inscribed on UNESCO as the intangible cultural heritage of the Bahamas. So it's internationally recognized. Our version of Junkanoo belongs to us.
And you can't take it away.
And you cannot take it away. But, I mean, there's some things I think we need to work on. Junkanoo is still technically described as a nuisance in our penal code or in our law books.
Right.
I mean, it's our premier culture, but it's a nuisance. Or at the last Junkanoo here in Grand Bahama, I remember asking somebody, why are we rushing the group so quickly to get through Junkanoo? And it's like, oh, the police say we have to get off the road by 12 o'clock.
Right. They don't know why.
I just look at it, I'm like...
They don't know why.
The police wanted to open the road back up.
You know what was so funny? I asked somebody the other day, I said, why, what we get out of it? Like, what would be, you ever look at how serious, let's look at the back line. Because I feel like that's the most serious line on the entire parade. I ain't even talking about the scrapers and the brass. Let's look at the real back line. The real back line in Junkanoo. All the whistles and all of that go back. Why are they so serious?
So I'll give you a theory from Africa.
Right.
We showed, so we've made some really good friends over there.
Right.
One of the good friends is, his name is Alex Kofi. He's an oral historian from Princestown. And actually, I think he's a descendant of Jan Quao. We showed him a video of Bella, really getting into it. And he said, wow, that looks like he's trying to summon the spirits of
Oh
our
Lord!
ancestors
Oh
to free
no,
you
no! Send them back.
from your slavery. It's just like that one we might want to keep a little quiet on because
Yeah, I know that one.
But no, it's about
It gotta be
connecting to
something
our
though.
ancestry.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have we plug in the documentary again.
Right.
Last year when I was filming Junkanoo practice,
Mm-hmm.
I was focused on Abella, and I just happened to be filming it in slow motion at the time.
Mhm.
I was so glad I picked that moment to film in slow motion. While he was shaking, you could
Right.
see he got in a trance. His eyes rolled back. Not a dangerous
Oh, yeah, yeah.
but just like he got so into it.
Tea interesting?
Now he was. I mean, you couldn't stop him.
Right, right.
I was like, that is one of the coolest things I think I've ever
Right.
filmed.
I also think what we don't talk about a lot is, especially in Freeport, Grand Bahama, I think a lot of persons are still experiencing. We are still experiencing a lot of oppression in different ways, and I think Junkanoo was one of those ways we could express ourselves and release. You know what I mean? I don't care what nobody say. Junkanoo rush out serious.
Oh,
You know?
it's
It's
What do you
serious.
say before you rush? It's wartime.
It's serious.
I mean, where do you think that wartime came from? Our
And so-
ancestors.
What I don't like to see is when persons try to take that away from persons, you know what I mean, and try to make Junkanoo what it isn't. Yes, we do have competitions, you know what I mean. Yes, we we have our groups and things like that. But this is therapeutic for a lot of persons. They might not say or might not even know, why they do what they do. But all I know is they please be serious.
And I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, they think the competition's killing Junkanoo." The competition is actually probably
Keeping
what has
it
kept
alive.
Junkanoo alive.
Yeah.
Because in Belize, they now have a competition for their Junkanoo.
Right.
And the competition itself is not that long.
Right.
But it was a way to save their Junkanoo because they noticed it was starting to
Right.
die. And so their Junkanoo is more of an individual performance,
Mm-hmm.
but you still do it in a group. So I went to Belize's Junkanoo last year. And I went to their competition, and then I went to what they do on the street.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting to see that the person who won like the best dancer in the
Right.
competition was an 18-year-old boy.
Wow.
He was still in high school, and he was the best, what they call a banquata.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, when they told me how young he was,
Mhm.
I couldn't believe it.
Right.
But it's because of that competition that someone as young as him. And then I was told his brother won the junior competition.
Right.
So it's in the family.
Right. But I think healthy competition is definitely vital when it comes to creating communities. You know what I mean? And so I think people outside of their respective jobs and careers and things like that, family life, you need something to do. You know what I mean? But what I don't get is to this day, persons refuse to do their research on removing the stigma that we have placed on Junkanoo. You know what I mean? That Junkanoo is a idol or criminals, delinquents, and we have received every bad name in the book. But I think what's gonna bring persons closer to, Junkanoo and Freeport is when we dive deeper into the documentary, for sure. And of course the podcast, so that persons can understand, there's people from all walks of life.
All walks of life.
Right.
You have doctors, lawyers, politicians, professors, teachers.
Right.
Yes, you do have some criminals. But what they
Right.
say is that Junkanoo gives them structure and something to do
Right, right.
to take them out of that criminal element.
Right.
Shouldn't we embrace that?
Exactly. I think it's the colonization that has occurred in the Bahamas that has created, a dislike. I think a lot of persons want to move as far away from their respective culture and move into something different because they see it as useless.
Well, I'm really looking forward to what we uncover in this podcast and
Right.
actually in the documentary too. I think it's going to be a great experience.
It's gonna be interesting.
So I talked about a tradition we're going to be doing here on our podcast, and since it's the first one, we have to start off with a tradition. Since Walker's Key Maravilla Rum is our sponsor, we're going to be taking shots of this rum every podcast, at least for those who drink. If they don't drink, We won't take a shot. Or at least they won't.
We'll take a shot for them.
We'll take the shot for them. So the Walker's Key Maravilla rum can be bought at the Bahamas Maritime Museum here in Freeport, or if you're in Nassau, it's made by John Watlins, and you can purchase it there.
Can't wait to try it. Okay. I guess a toast to new beginnings in Junkanoo. It do be tasting like tequila though.
It's a little smoky. It's aged in bourbon barrels. My type of rum. But once again, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Maravilla Rum. We'd like to thank the Swingers for allowing us to host our first podcast in their shack. And you'll see over the episodes, we'll be in different people's shacks, interviewing leaders, bellers, builders. If you're in Junkanoo, we're trying to interview you.
Right.
And just remember to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and hopefully we see you next time.
Bye. Okay, that one was a little bit